They say the world doesn't owe you anything, but it sure knows how to take everything if you let it. I was 17 the night I stopped being a girl and became something else, something hard, something unforgiving. The innocence I clung to was pried from me the moment I stood beside two mangled bodies in a cold hospital hallway, my trembling hands gripping my 12-year-old sister's, Claire's, as a nurse whispered words I will never forget. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice a threadbare comfort soaked in antiseptic and finality. "They didn't make it." Our parents, Michael and Diane Morgan, were the kind of people who believed in decency and fairness, the kind who gave up new clothes to buy Christmas presents, who drove a dented station wagon for 15 years just so we could go to school with lunch money in our pockets. They were driving home from a second-shift warehouse job when a drunk man in a black Escalade with 3 prior DUIs decided a red light wasn't worth stopping for. That Escalade didn't stop for the red, and neither did it stop for their lives. Claire didn't cry that night. I did enough for both of us. The social worker asked if we had any relatives. We didn't. A grandmother with dementia in a care home 3 states away and an uncle who once borrowed $5,000 and vanished off the face of the earth. Those didn't count. When she turned to me and asked, "Do you want to stay together?" I didn't hesitate. I lied. I said, "Yes, I can take care of us." I said I was ready. I wasn't. But I did it anyway. We moved into the smallest apartment I could afford with my after-school job at a diner and a weekend position at a thrift store. I fed Claire first and ate what she left behind. When she needed new shoes, I skipped the textbooks for my night business classes and photocopied notes instead. I never bought myself a coat that year. I wore my mother's old cardigan layered under 3 shirts and told myself I liked it that way. The day Claire got into Holloway Academy, a private school with ivy climbing its gates and children whose lunches cost more than my weekly groceries, I nearly passed out in the admissions office from the weight of it all. Her test scores were brilliant, her interview even better. They offered her a partial scholarship and said, if a parent or guardian can cover the remainder, she's in. Guardian. That word didn't feel real yet. I remember signing that acceptance paper with a hand that shook so hard, the pen carved little gouges into the desk. I remember Claire's face, lit with a joy so pure it almost made me forget the looming reality of the tuition payments. Almost. Every night I studied. I read business case studies with dry ramen between my teeth and highlighters staining the sleeves of my diner uniform. I came home to a sister who flourished, debate club, art classes, music, and I told myself every ache in my bones was worth it. We didn't have much, but I carved out dignity and routine. And then I met Martin Heller. It started with a spilled coffee. I was in the thrift store on a Sunday afternoon, hunched behind the register, half asleep and nursing a paper cut on my pinky when an older man in a perfectly tailored overcoat knocked over his travel mug trying to inspect a vintage globe. He muttered a curse that barely disguised a New York accent and apologized like someone not used to doing it often. "Don't worry," I said, grabbing paper towels. "I've cleaned worse." He raised a brow. "That's quite a thing to say at 17. "I'm 18 next week," I corrected. "And I've worked here since I was 16. I've cleaned up more spills than I can count." He chuckled. "You don't sound like a teenager." Because I don't have the luxury to be one. He didn't walk away like most customers did. He asked for my name. Then he came back the next week and the week after. Over time, I learned that Martin Heller wasn't just a retired CEO, he was the Martin Heller. The man who built one of the most formidable logistics firms on the East Coast before selling it for a sum so astronomical, Forbes didn't print it out of respect. "You remind me of me," he said one day, folding his arms as I swept the front porch. "Only hungrier." He gave me a card, no job offer, no promises, just a card with his name and a simple sentence scrawled in ink on the back. "One day, you'll build something. When you do, call me." I didn't call him then. I was still trying to survive. There were nights I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was doing any of this right. My arms would ache from bussing tables, my brain sore from back-to-back lectures on supply chain theory, and Claire would be asleep next to me with that tiny furrow in her brow that only relaxed when I smoothed her hair back. I didn't know then what I was building, but the seed had been planted, and it would grow into something they'd never see coming. There's something almost sacred about being invisible. When people don't see you coming, they show you who they really are. I was 27 the morning I signed the paperwork that made me the majority shareholder of Virulix Industries. The transaction itself was mundane: 5 signatures, 2 notarized forms, and a final wire transfer routed through 3 countries, each more secretive than the last. No applause, no champagne, no congratulations. Just a quiet ding on my laptop confirming the funds had cleared and that the empire, though still unaware of it, now belonged to me. Virulix wasn't just another tech startup. It was a hydra of innovation, bleeding-edge cybersecurity tools, data encryption patents, predictive AI systems. The kind of company that didn't just ride trends, it created them, bent markets to its will, and reshaped the digital skeleton of global commerce. And now it was mine. Well, legally speaking, it was owned by Tricor Horizon Investments, a firm in the Cayman Islands run by 3 silent board members who didn't actually exist. They, in turn, answered to a trust founded by a private foundation in Luxembourg. The foundation's founder? A widow named Eleanor Blake. No one knew she was me. Martin Heller called it my ghost blueprint. You can have power or applause, Ava, he told me once over a glass of 60-year-old whiskey on the balcony of his Manhattan penthouse. But not both. If you want to burn the world clean, do it from behind glass, not in front of cameras. He wasn't wrong. I didn't want to be seen. I wanted to be obeyed. So, I became Ava Blake, the overqualified new operations analyst sitting 2 floors beneath the executive boardroom of my own company. I wore the same 3 pencil skirts on rotation, carried a cracked phone with a sticky note on the back that said "buy milk," and laughed at jokes I'd heard 100 times from men who thought I was harmless. I took the subway. I brought lunch in Tupperware. I acted the part of someone forgettable. And it worked. No one looked twice. Certainly not Travis Donnelly. Travis was the kind of man you could smell before you saw: cologne like aggression, tailored suits with subtle monograms, and teeth always half showing like he was ready to bite or brag. He called me Blake on day 1 and didn't stop, even after I corrected him once. "Too many Avas around here," he said with a wink. "You'll get used to it." He had a reputation for being sharp, smart, fast-talking, and hungry. The kind of middle-tier exec who made interns cry in conference rooms and sent flowers the next day signed by his secretary. He saw potential in me. Or rather, he saw opportunity. "You've got instincts," he told me one afternoon, standing just a little too close in the copy room while pretending to review my proposal for optimizing our internal audit schedule. "But instincts aren't enough. You need someone to champion your ideas. Let me be that guy." That guy submitted my proposal with his name on it 2 days later. It passed the executive review board with applause. He never mentioned my contribution again. That was the first lesson. In silence, they steal. But I let him have it. I let him have all of it, because pawns with confidence make excellent shields for queens preparing their checkmate. Claire joined the company the month after I did. She had no idea. To her, I was just another cog in the machine, another girl with neat hair and polite smiles, someone who got her name wrong the first time we met in the cafeteria line. I remember that moment with painful clarity, how her face crinkled in a smile that mirrored our mother's, how she laughed at something trivial, not knowing her sister was standing 3 feet away in the skin of a stranger. She was thriving. A marketing coordinator with a rising profile and a natural grace that made people listen when she spoke. The world loved Claire. And I loved watching her succeed from the shadows, where it was safe, where she would never be tainted by what I was building. Then there was Ria. We had grown up on the same block, played the same childhood games, memorized each other's phone numbers before we ever memorized multiplication tables. She knew what my favorite cereal was and the name of the boy I had kissed behind the bleachers in ninth grade. But time is a cruel editor, and memories have sharp edges when compared. Rhea worked in HR now. Friendly on the surface, all soft pastel cardigans and framed photos of her dog on her desk. She hugged me when we were introduced, even though I introduced myself as Ava Blake. "You just remind me of someone," she said, eyes scanning mine too carefully. "Someone I used to know." She invited me to lunch. She told me about her frustrations with management, about being overlooked for a recent promotion, about Claire, she's lovely, but some people just have it easier, don't they? She'd said, sipping her latte with that practiced calm. Always the golden child. I didn't respond. I just watched her. And in that silence, I realized the second truth. Envy is the quietest poison. And it always wears the face of a friend. I kept my routine. I worked harder than anyone else in the room and never complained. I showed up early, stayed late, took notes in every meeting, nodded in all the right places, and played dumb when men explained things to me I had invented a decade ago. Every quarter, I sat through strategy sessions where Travis pitched ideas I'd whispered to him 2 weeks earlier, and where Claire's reports were scrutinized by men with legacy titles and inherited roles. Rhea once accidentally forwarded a confidential complaint to my inbox, detailing how another analyst claimed I was overreaching, ambitious, trying too hard. I replied with a thank you and a smiley face. Then I quietly approved the budget line that cut that analyst's department by 17%. Ghosts don't need applause. Just silence and time. There was one moment that nearly broke my resolve. It was a Wednesday in March when Claire burst into the lunchroom, tears still smudging the edges of her makeup. She didn't see me at first. I was in the corner, headphones in but no music playing. I watched her sit with Rhea, who rubbed her back and whispered, "He's not worth it, Claire. You're better than him." Travis. He had used her. Of course he had. They had kissed at a corporate retreat, and then he stopped replying to her messages. Told someone in product that she had overread the signals. Called her a bit intense behind her back. Now she sat there, small and humiliated, while my fingernails pressed half-moons into my palm under the table. I wanted to scream. Instead, I called Martin. He answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. He didn't ask for what. He already knew. There are moments in life when time doesn't just slow, it stops. It holds its breath. It dares you to blink first. The morning I was fired, I didn't blink. I had already known something was unraveling beneath the polished surface of Virlix Industries. You don't build an empire from shadows and stay blind to the tremors running through its foundation. What I didn't expect, what I never could have imagined, was that the knife would come not from strangers at the gate, but from the very hands I once reached for in the dark. It started, as betrayals often do, with numbers. Numbers that didn't align, trends that bent awkwardly, and cost projections that looked almost too perfect to be real. I studied the quarterly earnings reports late at night when no one was watching, overlaying them against investor meeting notes and cross-referencing back-end access logs with shadow activity on the system I had designed before anyone knew my name. What I found made my blood run cold. Travis, our fearless predator in a suit, had orchestrated a massive restructuring plan behind closed doors. Not the usual budget tightening or casual reorg executives perform with half-hearted sincerity. No, this was a purge dressed as progress. 100 employees across 3 departments, all scheduled for elimination, just 2 weeks before the next major investor call. Not because of underperformance. Not because of any real necessity. But because numbers on a slide deck looked better when human lives were erased from the bottom line. The irony? Claire's team was on the list. So was Rhea's assistant. So was every intern who worked past midnight hoping for a future that had already been decided for them. And so I did what I had to do. Using one of the anonymous proxies built into the corporate system, an old backdoor protocol Martin had helped me create in our earliest days, I inserted a ghost directive into the HR automation engine. Just a tweak, just enough. The purge was to be paused pending internal compliance review. It bought them time. A week. Maybe 2. Just enough to build their defenses, to move their roles, to make themselves indispensable. But ghosts don't leave footprints. And someone noticed the shadows shifting. The backlash came swiftly. 3 days after the delay took effect, I walked into the break room to find silence where usual chatter lived. People glanced my way and quickly turned back to their phones, their coffee, the grain of the tile floor. Rhea didn't return my good morning. Claire passed me in the hallway without a smile. Even Travis didn't offer his performative smirk. Just a nod. Cold. Surgical. I knew then that the game had changed. What I didn't realize was how dirty it had become. It was a Thursday afternoon when I was summoned to HR. I hadn't even opened the message before I knew. The room was colder than usual, lit with that artificial yellow that makes everyone look slightly sick. Rhea sat behind her desk, flanked by another HR rep I didn't recognize. Legal, no doubt. Travis leaned against the wall, arms folded, that smug calm he wore when he'd already decided how a conversation would end. "Blake," he said, as if I were a stranger. "Please sit down." I didn't move. Rhea cleared her throat, suddenly fascinated by the papers in front of her. "Ava Blake," she began, her tone rehearsed to sound like concern but hollow underneath, "we've received multiple reports of irregular conduct over the past several weeks." I raised one brow. "Irregular?" "Yes," she continued. "Anonymous data manipulation, bypassing protocol, unauthorized access to sensitive HR infrastructure." I didn't reply, because I saw it now. Every piece had been perfectly placed. Every thread pulled with surgical precision. Claire's signature was on the complaint packet. That was the part that knocked the breath from my chest like a punch from nowhere. I saw her name at the bottom of the internal report, above a typed note that said, "Concerned about possible sabotage to team morale and data integrity." Sabotage. Sabotage. That word echoed so violently inside me that I didn't hear the next few sentences Rhea uttered. I didn't hear Travis talking about policy or protocol or zero tolerance in a post-equinox compliance world. All I could hear was Claire's voice in my head, laughing softly while we watched late-night reruns on the mattress we used to share when the heater in our apartment broke. I could hear her whispering, "You always make me feel safe," the night before her first Viralix interview. I had stood outside the door with her resume clutched in my hands, coaching her through her nerves like a mother bird pushing its fledgling out of the nest. Now she had signed a paper that might as well have said, "I never knew you." And Rhea had done more than sign. She had falsified records, fabricated infractions, old reports mysteriously found, with notes suggesting behavioral issues and inappropriate access attempts. All backdated, all perfectly aligned to build a paper trail of misconduct that didn't exist. I knew it, and I knew she knew I knew it, but she didn't flinch. Because jealousy turns people into creatures without shame. Travis spoke last. "Ava, you've clearly got talent," he said, stepping forward with that gleaming shark smile that once made interns blush and now made me want to set the room on fire. But this kind of disruption, it's not sustainable. It puts the whole team at risk. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pick up the folder in front of me, flip it over and slam down my actual name, my actual title, my ownership percentage, my authority that outranked all of them combined. I wanted to remind them that I was the reason they had bonuses last year, that I was the architect of the system they used to run this entire facade of efficiency. But I didn't, because that's not how ghosts win. I stood. I adjusted my blazer. And I looked each of them in the eye. First Rhea, who blinked first. Of course she did. She always blinked first. Then Travis, who held my gaze 2 seconds too long, trying to figure out what power still lived behind my eyes. And finally Claire, whose absence in that room spoke louder than any scream ever could. "You'll need to collect your personal items," the legal rep said from the corner. Escort will be arranged if necessary. I smiled. It wasn't kind. It wasn't polite. It was the smile of a woman who has spent 10 years learning how to disappear and now realizes how beautiful it feels to be underestimated. I walked out of the room with my head high, my steps even. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when the elevator doors closed, not when I reached my desk and found a small box already waiting, as if someone had known the outcome in advance. Not when I saw the post-it Claire had left the day before dinner this weekend, as if she hadn't already drawn a knife behind my back. Not even when I stepped outside and felt the cold wind hit my face like a slap from fate itself. No, I didn't cry. But something inside me cracked. Not because I had been fired. Not because of the lies. Not even because the people I had tried so hard to protect had turned on me like I was a stranger. It was because they believed it would end like this. Like I would walk away. Like this was the end. But ghosts don't fade. They haunt. The truth has a sound. It doesn't always arrive with thunder or applause or the cinematic swell of violins in the background. Sometimes it arrives in the early hours of the morning, disguised as a single ping in an inbox, quiet and unimposing. But once it lands, it shatters everything you thought you understood. The morning after they fired me, every employee at Verelix Industries received that sound. I sat alone at the edge of a rooftop 2 blocks away, the city barely stretching its limbs beneath the overcast dawn, sipping black coffee while watching inboxes burn. The board had moved faster than expected, which was always Martin's gift, timing. The email had been drafted for months, signed and sealed, waiting only for a trigger. My dismissal was the match they lit with reckless confidence, never realizing the forest had been soaked in gasoline since the day I walked through their doors. Subject: Executive Transition Notice. TO: All staff, Verelix Industries. From Verelix Board of Directors. Effective immediately, Ava Morgan has been appointed as Chief Executive Officer of Verelix Industries. All current reporting structures are suspended until further notice. Meetings will be scheduled. We thank you for your cooperation during this time of transition. The aftermath was biblical. Phones rang off their cradles. Text messages exploded into threads of disbelief and frantic speculation. The upper floor buzzed with the static panic of people who had suddenly remembered every conversation they had ever had, every insult ever whispered behind closed doors, every judgment ever spoken in what they thought were safe spaces. Claire dropped her coffee. Rhea locked herself in HR's records office for nearly 45 minutes, attempting to scrub files that were already archived in 4 offshore servers I personally paid to encrypt. Travis didn't even come to the building. His first reaction, always true to form, was to vanish into a conference call filled with legal counsel and preemptive apologies. But you can't negotiate with a ghost you can't see coming, and this time I was done hiding. I returned at 11:06 a.m., not through the main lobby, through the executive elevator, the one with biometric access and a private entrance that only 3 people in the entire company had ever used. The board had made sure the announcement came after the system was already reset. My palm opened the door without hesitation. My heels struck the floor with a rhythm that silenced 3 conversations in mid-breath. My name tag was gone. My briefcase was now a leather binder engraved with the company seal. The girl they fired did not walk in that morning. The woman who owned the building did. My office, formerly labeled with Travis's name in gold-embossed letters, had been stripped clean within the hour. A new plaque gleamed under the overhead light. Ava Morgan, Chief Executive Officer. I stepped inside, closed the door, and waited. The first knock came from Rhea. She looked like someone who had aged 10 years in a single morning. Her hands clutched a folder filled with already irrelevant justifications, carefully worded excuses, and copies of documents I had read long before she knew they existed. She tried to smile. It faltered before it reached her eyes. "Ava," she began, voice dry, brittle. I know this must be awkward, but I wanted to offer transparency. What happened yesterday, it wasn't personal. No, I said, interrupting her without raising my voice. It was worse than personal. She blinked, taken aback, as if expecting confrontation, but not clarity. It was cowardice, I continued. Cowardice dressed in a cardigan, holding a clipboard, hiding behind policy like it could mask your bitterness. I was under pressure, she said quickly. Travis, he pushed us, made it sound like. Stop. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. You didn't betray me, Rhea, I said quietly, folding my hands on the desk. You betrayed the idea of who you used to be. The girl who wanted more. The girl who once told me she dreamed of building something that made people feel seen. That girl would have protected interns, not falsified their records to climb over them. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't flinch. I'm not pressing charges, I told her. I'm not sending letters to compliance or to the board. Because this isn't about vengeance. It's about truth. She nodded slowly, almost grateful. You're terminated. Effective immediately, I said without pause. Security will escort you. You will not return to your desk. You will not speak to anyone on your way out. If you attempt to alter a single document in our system, your pension disappears. Your final severance package will be decided based on your silence. She opened her mouth, perhaps to plead. But I raised one hand. Leave. And she did. No goodbye. Just a broken shadow of who I used to trust. Travis arrived 2 hours later. He entered with the cautious bravado of a man who had not yet accepted he'd already lost. His tie was tighter than usual, his shoes shined with obsessive polish, but his eyes flickered the way animals do when they smell the blood in their own cage. Ava, he said, extending a hand I didn't take. It's been an eventful day. I gestured to the seat in front of my desk. He sat down like someone still hoping for leniency. Let's skip the theater, I said. You know what this is. He nodded, attempting a grin. I'm assuming a demotion? I get it. I stepped out of line. But let me be frank, I've been good for this company. Numbers don't lie. No, they don't, I agreed. Which is why your new position will be in the intern development program. His face dropped. Your what? You'll start in the mailroom, I explained. You'll handle package deliveries, interoffice logistics, and attend entry-level training. Your official title will be Junior Operational Support. You're demoting me to an intern? His voice cracked on the last word. After everything I've done? I looked at him evenly. You deserve worse, I said. But I'm not here to destroy you. Because mediocrity punishes itself. You'll stay on payroll. You'll wake up every morning and walk into a building you used to run, now run by the woman you tried to bury. And every task, every time someone calls you kid, you'll remember that you earned this. Every single step. He stood abruptly, face burning. This is a joke. A power trip. No, I said calmly. This is a lesson. One you'll keep learning until you either grow up or quit. He didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say. Claire was the last. She didn't come to me. She sat in her office, unmoving, for 6 hours after the announcement. A frozen figure in front of a screen that now displayed my name, my face, my title. When I finally walked in, she didn't look up. I sat in the chair across from her, the same way I had 100 times in our childhood bedroom when she couldn't sleep. I built this company, I said, voice quiet, almost tender. Every piece, every server, every department, every system. I built it so you would never have to wonder where your rent came from. So you would never be laid off. So you could chase dreams without asking anyone's permission. I stayed in the shadows because I wanted you to shine. Her lip trembled. I didn't know, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't want to know. And that's what hurts. She finally looked at me, eyes swollen with the kind of guilt that doesn't have a name. You signed a paper that accused me of sabotage, I continued. You believed what they told you because it was easier than believing I might have done something right. Tears streamed down her face. I'm not firing you, I said, standing slowly. Because I would have taken the fall 1,000 times to protect you. I already did. but I won't carry you anymore." She sobbed openly now, a sound so raw it could have torn paint from the walls. "You have to learn who you are without me," I said. "Because if you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life afraid of becoming yourself." Then I walked out. And for the first time since this all began, I felt light. Not happy, not whole, but free. Time does not heal all wounds. It simply teaches you how to live around them, how to move through days with a quiet ache in your bones that eventually becomes familiar, like old scars you trace absent-mindedly in the dark. It had been 2 years since the day I reclaimed my name and my seat, 2 years since the world finally saw the face behind the curtain and understood it had always been mine. In the beginning, the silence was deafening. No more pretending. No more hiding. No more anonymity to cloak my decisions like armor against judgment. Every meeting, every headline, every investor call bore my name now. Ava Morgan. CEO. Founder. Survivor. Every compliment felt like a strange new language I hadn't yet learned to trust. Every apology from those who remained came too late to matter and too often to keep. But healing isn't linear. It doesn't announce itself with parades or milestone cakes. It whispers. It creeps in slowly through half-smiles and quiet reconciliations that don't need fanfare to mean something real. Claire visits on Sundays now. Not every Sunday. Some weeks she's too busy building the business she created from scratch with nothing but a laptop and the memory of failure she never wants to repeat. It's a branding agency in a converted garage filled with plants and mismatched furniture. She calls it Emberlight because, as she told me one night over tea, even ashes can glow when you let them breathe. We don't pretend anymore. She doesn't try to explain the past, and I don't ask for it. We talk about her latest projects, her difficult clients, and sometimes, when the wine has softened the edges of our guard, we talk about the fire between us that nearly burned us both down. She still tears up sometimes when she looks at me too long. "I didn't deserve your forgiveness," she said once. "I didn't give it because you earned it," I told her. "I gave it because I needed to let go." That's the difference between love and savior complexes. I don't rescue people anymore. Rhea, from what I hear, is still chasing ghosts. After her termination, she tried to land another HR director role, but the industry has a memory longer than she anticipated. She filed lawsuits, whispered into microphones about retaliation, about workplace politics, about gender bias, truths buried inside lies so intricate no one could separate the message from the messenger. But people stopped listening. Her voice became background noise, a cautionary tale dressed as a comeback tour. The last I heard, she was working on a book proposal titled The Collapse of Empathy in Corporate America. No one's picked it up. Travis, on the other hand, has pivoted. Of course he has. He runs a podcast now. It's called Table Talk. Office Power moves with TD, and it has a modest following of 20-somethings who still think charisma can be monetized into credibility. I listened to one episode out of morbid curiosity. He opened with, "I've been to the top, and I've been to the mailroom." Both teach you something. But only one teaches you how to climb again. He never mentioned my name. He wouldn't dare. But the bitterness was there, in every half-joke, every veiled anecdote, every subtle suggestion that he'd been wronged by a woman who mistook control for leadership. He called it a learning experience. I called it irony and surround sound. I didn't waste energy on him. I had a company to rebuild. 2 years into my tenure as public CEO, I began shifting the foundation beneath Virilix Industries, not with press releases or strategy documents, but with policies buried deep inside our operational code. Department by department, I rewrote the rules. We no longer operated on silent hierarchies or executive favoritism. Instead, we implemented transparent salary bands, rotating leadership councils, and a conflict mediation process led by an independent ethics board I funded myself. But the biggest shift was still coming. A month ago, I filed the paperwork to begin transitioning Virilix into a hybrid employee-owned corporation. Not because I'm stepping down, not yet, but because I finally understand what legacy is supposed to look like. It's not the size of your name on the building or the number of board votes you command. It's what remains when your voice is no longer the loudest in the room. It's the trust people feel when they speak up. It's the idea that the system you built won't collapse without you, but will evolve in your absence. Power used to mean control to me. Now it means continuity. There are days I still walk into my office and feel the ghost of who I used to be, the girl who swept office floors while dreaming of blueprints, the sister who lied about her exhaustion to keep her family fed, the woman who built empires in secret because she didn't believe the world would let her lead in the light. She isn't gone. She's just grown. Some afternoons, I walk the atrium when the day is ending, when the light pours through the glass ceiling and turns the marble floor into a cathedral. That's where we place the plaque, simple, steel, and clean-lined, mounted on the far wall where every visitor has to pass by before they can reach the elevators. The words are mine. I wrote them in a notebook years ago, when I didn't yet believe they'd ever be read. Built by the hands that stayed hidden, thrived by the truths that came to light. I run my fingers over the edge of the plaque every time I walk by, not out of pride, but out of reverence. Because this place, this company, this legacy, it wasn't built on perfection. It was built on survival, on resolve, on the belief that even when no one sees you, your work still matters. Your voice still echoes. And when the time comes, I'll step back. I'll hand over the keys. But until then, I'll keep building what's left of this world into something worth inheriting. Because power fades, but purpose remains. Always.